So it's kind of a logical fallacy in a way?
Yeah, it is.
It's like dismissing the possibility of something interesting just because our brains are doing what they're supposed to do, recognizing patterns?
Yeah.
Welcome to Deep Dive Podcast, where false assumptions are kindly and utterly destroyed.
Hey everybody, and welcome to the Deep Dive.
Yeah.
You know, we love to take those really fascinating topics that you send us and really unpack them. And today we're going to be looking at pareidolia.
Yeah.
Thanks to an article one of you sent in. And this one's really interesting because it kind of challenges the typical way we think about pareidolia.
Absolutely.
It argues that pareidolia, you know, that phenomenon where we see faces in the clouds or animals in random shapes,
Right.
that it often gets misinterpreted in a way that actually dismisses genuine patterns. So we're going to dive in.
Yeah, let's get into it.
And see what's really going on with this. So,
I mean, we've all heard people just use pareidolia as like the explanation for anything, right? That's a little bit out there.
right.
But this article makes a really strong case that there's more to it.
Yeah. So let's kind of start with the basics here.
Yeah.
The article gives us a pretty clear definition of pareidolia.
Okay.
It says, quote, the tendency to perceive a specific, often meaningful image in a random or ambiguous visual pattern.
Yeah.
So, seems straightforward enough, right?
Yeah. Yeah. It seems pretty straightforward, but this is where it gets interesting because the author is saying that this definition is often sort of twisted to mean
Okay.
that, like, our brains are just making stuff up.
Right.
Like our imaginations are running wild and creating patterns where none really exist. But the author says that's not actually what pareidolia is really about.
So it's more about just acknowledging that our brains are kind of wired to recognize patterns.
Yeah, like we're pattern-seeking machines, right? So if we see a face in a cloud, it's not because we're hallucinating. It's because there really is an arrangement of water vapor that genuinely resembles a face.
Right.
It's there.
It's really there.
Yeah.
Okay, so that makes sense. But then how does this kind of misconception about pareidolia lead to this dismissal of real patterns, as the article suggests?
Well, their author uses a really great example. He uses an example of a smear in a psychological test.
Okay.
So you think about those ink blot tests where you're shown like a random smear and you have to say what you see. If that smear happens to look like a ghost, that pattern actually exists in the smear. Your brain's not making it up. It's simply recognizing a pattern that emerged from randomness.
Okay, so that makes sense.
Yeah.
But then how does that translate to, you know, this idea that we're dismissing real patterns?
Yeah.
How do people use this to dismiss things?
Well, I think people use pareidolia as like a shortcut to dismiss anything that is unusual or that they don't understand.
Right.
So it's like, oh, you saw a strange light in the sky, must be pareidolia, case closed.
Right.
But the thing is, just because we recognize a pattern doesn't automatically mean we're imagining it or that it's meaningless.
So it's kind of a logical fallacy in a way?
Yeah, it is.
It's like dismissing the possibility of something interesting just because our brains are doing what they're supposed to do, recognizing patterns.
Yeah, our brains are doing their job and we're like, no bad brain.
Yeah, exactly. And the author of the article calls this out specifically as a strawman fallacy.
Yes, and he uses an analogy of finding the number pi, you know, 3.14159 and so on, within a random sequence of numbers.
Okay.
Recognizing pi in that sequence isn't pareidolia.
Right.
It's acknowledging that a specific pattern actually exists within that randomness.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's not about denying our brains see patterns.
Right.
It's about kind of questioning what those patterns mean and where they come from.
Exactly.
And sometimes that requires a little more investigation than just chalk it up to pareidolia.
I think pareidolia in itself is a kind of trivial observation. It's just saying our brains are good at spotting patterns.
Right.
The real question is, what's the origin of those patterns?
Yeah.
Are they purely random or is there something more going on?
And that's where things start to get really interesting, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Because if we're too quick to dismiss everything as just pareidolia,
right,
we might be missing out on some really intriguing discoveries.
It's like the author is saying, hey, let's not shut down curiosity before it even gets started.
Right.
Let's acknowledge the patterns and then dig a little deeper to understand what they might mean.
I like this. So it's not about being gullible and believing everything we see.
All right.
But it's also not about being overly skeptical and dismissing everything as just our imagination.
Yeah. You got to find that balance, right?
Yeah.
Between open-mindedness and critical thinking.
Right.
That's what makes exploring these topics so fascinating.
Well said. So we've established that pareidolia itself doesn't actually dismiss the existence of patterns.
Right.
But what about the meaning we often associate with those patterns?
Right.
That's where things get even more intriguing, right?
Yeah, that's a great point. Let's get into that. I think the meaning we give to these patterns that we're seeing, that's really where it gets interesting. And this is what the author is kind of challenging here, this idea that we're just like projecting meaning onto these neutral shapes.
Right.
He makes this really interesting argument that shapes and forms actually have inherent meaning in themselves.
Okay, I'm intrigued. Break that down for me a little bit.
Okay, so think about it this way. A cross might hold, deep spiritual significance for someone who's religious, while someone else might just see it as two intersecting lines.
Right.
It's not that one person is projecting meaning onto it and the other isn't. It's more like the meaning is already embedded in the shape itself.
Interesting.
And whether we recognize that meaning just depends on our own experiences and knowledge.
Wow, that's a really different way of looking at it.
Yeah.
So it's not that our brains are like creating meaning out of thin air,
right?
But rather that we're recognizing meaning that's already there.
Exactly.
On what we already know.
Yeah, and this ties into the author's point about how pareidolia is often misused to shut down exploration. So if we automatically dismiss any seemingly unusual pattern as just pareidolia, we're basically saying that our current understanding of the world is complete.
Right.
There's no room for anything new or unexpected.
It's like putting blinders on.
Totally, yeah. And that's where this whole conversation gets really exciting, because it opens up the possibility that some of these patterns that we've been dismissing as just pareidolia might actually be clues to something much bigger.
Like what? Give me an example.
Okay, well, think about crop circles.
Okay.
A lot of people just shrug them off as elaborate hoaxes.
Right.
But what if some of them are genuine anomalies that we haven't been able to explain yet?
Right.
Or what about those strange patterns and formations that we see in nature?
Yeah.
Are they all just random occurrences?
Yeah.
Or could they be signs of something more complex at play?
This is making me think about those optical illusions.
Oh, yeah.
Where you see one thing and then suddenly your perception shifts and you see something completely different.
Exactly.
It's the same image, but the meaning changes based on how you look at it.
That's a great analogy, and it just highlights how our perception is always shaped by our own experiences and expectations.
For sure.
So maybe what we perceive as random or meaningless today might actually be revealed as something profound as our knowledge expands.
Okay, so this is really blowing my mind.
Yeah.
So what's the takeaway here?
Okay.
How should we approach these seemingly unexplained patterns?
Right.
Especially given this new understanding of pareidolia.
I think the key is to embrace curiosity and critical thinking at the same time.
Okay.
It's not about blindly believing everything we see.
Right.
But it's also not about dismissing everything out of hand.
Right.
Instead, we should be asking questions, gathering evidence, and being open to all possibilities, even the ones that challenge our current understanding.
So instead of saying, oh, that's just pareidolia, we should be saying, okay, we see a pattern. What could have caused it?
Yeah, exactly.
Is it random or is there something more going on?
It's about approaching these things with a healthy dose of skepticism, but also with a sense of wonder.
Right.
And a willingness to consider that there might be more to the universe than we currently realize.
I love that that's a really powerful way to frame it.
Yeah.
It's like we're being invited to become explorers again, to rediscover that sense of awe and mystery that we often lose sight of as we get older.
I couldn't have said it better myself. And this is where the author's call to correct the record about pareidolia becomes so important.
Yeah.
He wants us to move beyond using it as like a tool for dismissal and instead embrace it as an invitation to delve deeper into the unknown.
So it's like he's saying, don't let your preconceived notions limit your understanding of the world. Be open to the possibilities.
Exactly.
And who knows what you might discover.
And that's the beauty of it all, right?
Yeah.
The universe is full of mysteries.
Right.
And who knows what incredible things we might find if we just have the courage to look beyond the surface.
It's like we were saying before, it's not about blindly accepting every strange pattern we see as proof of something extraordinary.
Right.
But it's also not about just dismissing everything out of hand either, right?
No, exactly. It's about finding that middle ground, that sweet spot between skepticism and open-mindedness, where we can kind of explore these mysteries without letting our own biases get in the way.
Yeah, this whole conversation has really got me thinking about all those times I've probably just dismissed something as just pareidolia.
Yeah.
Without really, stopping to think about it.
Right.
It makes you realize how much we might be missing out on.
Yeah.
Just because we're not paying close enough attention.
I think it's a good reminder that the universe is full of surprises and that our understanding of it is constantly evolving.
Yeah.
What we might consider impossible or absurd today could be common knowledge tomorrow.
Yeah. I'm reminded of all those scientific discoveries that were initially met with ridicule or disbelief.
Right.
Only to be proven true later on.
Exactly.
It really makes you realize that the boundaries of what we think we know are constantly being pushed.
Absolutely. It's like we're standing on the shoulders of giants, right?
Yeah.
And with each new discovery, we gain a clearer view of this vast and complex tapestry of the cosmos.
And who knows what incredible wonders are still out there waiting to be discovered.
I know, it's exciting.
It's enough to make you want to grab a telescope and a magnifying glass and a notebook.
Yeah.
And just head out into the world to explore.
Absolutely. The world is our laboratory.
Yeah.
Each one of us has the potential to make these groundbreaking discoveries if we just stay curious and keep our minds open.
Well, that's it for today, everyone. We've taken a deep dive into the fascinating world of pareidolia.
Yeah.
We challenged some common misconceptions about it.
Right.
And explored how a new understanding of this phenomenon might really open up a whole new world of possibilities.
And like always, we want to leave you with a question to think about.
Okay, hit us with it.
What seemingly random patterns have you encountered in your own life? And could they be trying to tell you something?
That is a great question for all of you out there to ponder until next time. Keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep those brains of yours firing on all cylinders. This is The Deep Dive. Signing off.